right, so for geometry, we got our warm-up sheets today. Again, it's on a sheet so you can show me or possibly turn it in on Fridays so I can see that you did your warm-ups right. If you miss a day and you need to get your warm-ups, you can always watch the videos, ideally, to get those, right? So, on our warm-up, you've written down the date and the objective. So our objective today is to be able to solve one-step equations and identify geometric vocabulary. So we're going to get to that vocabulary later. So, as a reminder, y'all know when I'm up here talking that I do not want to see headphones in your ears. That was day one stuff, right? So please do me the favor. Later on, we might get to the opportunity to listen to music. For now, follow along. So when we're solving these one-step equations, right, we're solving, what's the goal? What am I trying to do? We're solving for x, but the way we know we've solved is if x is by itself, alone. We call that isolating the variable. Now, on number one, x is not alone. There's a plus 7. Now, how do I get rid of anything in an equation? Well, in general, we always do the opposite, okay? Or we call it inverse operations. So, yes, if you said minus, in this case, yes. So you see the plus 7, you think what's the opposite of plus? Minus or subtraction, right? So underneath plus 7, now I'm going to model to you what I want you to model back to me, okay? Showing our work. So I see plus 7, opposite is minus 7. If I do it on one side of the equation, I'm going to do it on the other side of the equation. Now, that's not that hard to do, to show your work, okay? And the opposite things cancel out, so I can kind of cross them out and bring down what's left over. X and the equal sign, and what's 12 minus 7? 5. That should be not too bad, right? Number 2, x is not isolated. It's not by itself. So next to that x is a what? It's a minus 5, right? So underneath the minus 5, what should we write? The opposite of minus is plus. So again, I like to see the step. Some of us are more gifted than others at mental math, but all of us are able to write this down, okay? So we bring down x, we bring down equals, 2 plus 5 is 7. Cool. So the adding and subtracting, kind of straightforward for one step. Number 3, I have a 2 and an x. Now, 2 and x have nothing between them. So what does that mean? That means they're being multiplied. Now, real quick, I wanted to see if you know the names of these terms. So the 2, what do you call that number in front of that letter? There's a name for that thing. Starts with a C. Coefficient, okay? So if a number is in front of a letter, okay, coefficient, what's the letter called? Starts with a V. It's a variable, okay? So coefficient is this, variable is this, okay? So anytime there's a coefficient, that's the last thing you need to get rid of. We just said they're being multiplied, so the opposite is to divide, right? So divide by 2, and if I do it on one side, I'll do it on the other. So and I divided by 2 on both sides, the left sides cancel out, and I'm left with x equals, what's 8 divided by 2? 4. Okay. Last one is supposed to be a fraction, x divided by 2. Again, we think of the opposite. What's the opposite of dividing? Multiplying. There's a couple ways to write multiplication. I would prefer the dot so you don't get confused with x and the multiplication x, okay? One's a variable, one's an operation. Let's not confuse ourselves. So dot 2 for times 2. And make sure it doesn't look like 0.2 either. It's not a decimal, right? So times 2 times 2. These 2's cancel out. And I'm left with x equal sign. And 3 times 2 is 6. Okay. So moving forward. Okay, now this was a review of what you should have already done. Moving forward, if you have a one-step problem, I'm going to expect you can do that. Okay. there any questions on how we did any of these steps? Okay, so I know geometry you think is just shapes, but it's basically applying algebra to shapes. Okay, so you will have a lot of solving for x's here, and NSolve is not your friend when I'm telling you this first week that I expect to see your work. I'm taking time out of the day to show you how to do it. So again, it's not like excuses are out the window because I've told you the expectation, I've shown you how to do it, and we're going to show you how to do 2 steps, multi-steps. We're going to do it all, okay? So let me tell you what you're not going to do in the future. You're not going to do a whole assignment, and at the end, give me this fake outrage, like, what? I have to show my work? That's funny, because I'm telling you now, it's not going to work that way, okay? What? This crazy long problem that I just magically have the answer to? I can just do it in my brain, or use NSolve. Wrong, 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 okay? Some people, not everyone, but some people somehow get those answers by doing what? Copying or cheating, right? How do I tell the difference between someone who's cheating and not? I can't. So instead of assuming the worst, I'm just going to ask everyone to show their work, okay? So I need y'all to show your work, for real. All right, so we're going to move on to the other sheet you have. So don't lose the warm-up sheet. Now you have this sheet that looks like a bunch of plus signs, okay? We're going to do vocab, and we're going to represent it 4 ways, or we're going to talk about the vocab in 4 different ways. So let's start with our first vocab word, which is point. So you're going to start copying this down. Oh, whoops. Sorry. Let me scroll here. Okay. So you're going to start with point. Pick whichever cross or box you want to start with, right? And on each cross, the top left is where you're going to put the vocab word. The top right, you're going to draw it, represent it. Bottom left is the definition, and the bottom right is going to be the notation. Okay? So go ahead and start, everybody, writing down point. So a point, usually when we're graphing and you make a point, how do you represent a point? What is this called? A dot. I want everyone to hear me say this. A point is not the same thing as a dot, but a dot represents a point. Here's why I say that. What does it say right here about a point? It has no size. But a dot has some size, right? I mean, even if you make a tiny speck on your paper, you could still get a microscope. It has width. It has depth, right? Length and width. So here's the deal. Points cannot be seen. They are really just locations. So you think about like, on a map, like Google Maps or whatever, you got latitude and longitude, and wherever those cross, that's going to be a location, and that location is your point. Okay, so it's a location, and it has no size. Now, what do you notice about the notation? What is this right here? It's just a capital letter. If you see one capital letter, that represents a point. One location with no size, okay? Points can be where lines intersect. They can be on a line. That's what points are, okay? Any questions on points? So I'm telling you, in the future, you will have vocab, matching stuff, and will you know that location with no size is a point? Okay? All right, so let's move on to the next one. If you still need to write this down, if you're lagging behind, I'll leave it up here, and we'll move on to the front side. So on the front over here, we have a line, okay? So go ahead and start writing that down. What do you notice about the end of each line, or the end of the line? What are these right here? Arrowheads, right? So notice it says it extends how long? Forever. So technically you can't draw it because you'd be going forever. So we represent it with arrowheads. Arrowhead means keep going and keep going, okay? So line has 2 arrowheads, and it also has no thickness, just like points, no size. So it's basically too thin to see, and it goes forever. Now, do y'all see any lines in this room? See any lines in this room? Okay, so between the tiles, the edges, right, those are straight, and it's pretty thin, right? I would say that represents a line, kind of, except for the extending forever, right? Obviously, it ends here and ends there, but you get the idea. Something straight is part of a line. Cool? What notation? What's different about the notation? How many letters? 2 letters this time. So 2 points, and then on top is a what? So if you have a line with 2 arrowheads, on top of the 2 letters, you're going to put a line with 2 arrowheads. I'm making a big deal about this because there's other things we're going to learn about without arrowheads. You can't get them confused, okay? So again, this is a line, extends forever both directions, no thickness. That's the notation. Next one, line segment. It's part of a line. Notice the ends. I'll let you write that down now. How is a line segment different than a line at the ends here? So instead of arrowheads, we have end points. That's what it says in the definition, right? So no arrowheads, just a little section of a line is called a line segment. Okay? Now, if you look around the room, there's plenty of segments, like between the bricks here on the wall, this little section, it ends, it's kind of like a segment. Just remember, a real segment has no thickness, so this is more of a representation. Okay? So again, endpoint, all the points between them. How's the notation different? Two letters again, but on top is just a segment, right? A line segment. No arrowheads, basically, okay? So again, a regular line, two arrowheads, a line segment, no arrowheads. Right here, right here.
It shows the same thing. Why are they two different answers?
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why are they different?
Okay, right. So let's start with the CD. CD obviously has two endpoints, so that's obviously a segment, right? Let me show you on here with a different color. We'll go green. Okay, if I'm talking about from here to here and everything in between only, that's what this is. Okay. Now I know the picture has arrowheads in it, right? So the whole thing is a line. But if I'm talking about just between A and B, that's still a segment. Okay. So they'll ask you, like sometimes, name a segment. Even if you see a line, as long as you have 2 points, the segment is between the 2 points. Part of a line. All right. Next, this might be our last one for the day. Colinear. Did you know that co means to share? Like, have you ever heard of cooperation? Cooperating? That's when you are sharing a task or a mission or doing something together. So Mrs. Marrero and I cooperate in teaching this class. We co-teach, cooperate, and if 2 points are on the same line, sharing the same line, that's called co-linear. And you can see the word line in linear, so co, share, linear, line, share the line. So these 3 points share the line. And anytime you see 2 points, you know those 2 points, you can always make a line through 2 points. And down here we have an opposite, non-collinear, not a straight line. All right, are we good on collinear? The next one's just the opposite. We already have an example of it, but we're going to do non-collinear. Anytime you see 3 or more points that do not make a straight line, that's non-collinear. So everyone write this one down too. So again, non-collinear, there's no line on which all of the points lie. It either have to be a shape or a curve. All right, we'll do one last one for today. We're not going to finish, but we'll finish tomorrow. Everyone with me? Next one. Oh, sorry. Here, don't write this down. This is just examples. If you got 3 scoops in a row, that's collinear. Traffic light, 3 lights in a row. And on a map, Lubbock, Houston, and Galveston, straight line, collinear cities, more or less. But if they're not in a straight line, or if you got Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, non-collinear example. All right, let's talk about ray, the one that goes one direction. All right, so a ray is kind of like a segment, kind of like a line. Has one endpoint, one arrowhead. So again, part of a line starts at an endpoint and extends forever in one direction. So you could think about it like rays of a sun. They start at the sun and they go forever in one direction, kind of. So you can see what it looks like, endpoint, arrowhead. And notice the notation. AB with an arrow going which way? To the right. This one also is also going to the right. So I want everyone to see this real quick. How many of y'all would want to write CD for this one? Because you read left to right, right? And you would want to put the arrowhead on the left. That's not how it works for array. You always have to put the end point first, then the next point, and then the arrowhead goes that direction. So look at this. It's DC, arrow goes to the right. So again, right here, this is not the way don't do it like this. Do it like this. Okay? So again, notation for array. Start with the endpoint, go towards the arrowhead. So D, then C, then the arrow. Just like this. Okay? I know this one's more obvious. A then B, because it's endpoint, then the other point. This is the thing that most people confuse and get wrong. So always start with the endpoint letter, then the other letter. Arrowhead goes to the right. And we'll pick up on the rest of the vocab tomorrow.